itself now. Right, I'll bring to the Chief Executive is going to open, and we'll welcome Chantel, or springboard into the welcoming Chantel to the charges. Hear us how we've got to this.
I've said my piece, Your Worship, so we'll hand directly to Chantel. And
welcome Rachel Kelleher in her new position as the Director of Community, such dizzying heights. We also have the Director of Group Strategy and the CE office behind in the background there too. But he's just in the background to make sure that the Director of Community and the Head of Value for Money provide such excellent service. Thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing this.
Thank you to the Mayor and Chief Executive for the introduction into this important piece of work, and thank you also for the input and acknowledge the PSA that we just heard from. My name is Chantel Spritsky. I'm the Head of Value for Money, and beside me, as you've just been introduced, is Rachel. Today we have a quick presentation, not too long, and this reflects the core elements of the report that you have received in the open agenda. I will not go into too much further detail, as we have recently workshopped this last week, and as well as some of the councillors have taken the opportunity to attend a drop-in session on Tuesday. So just going back to the origins of this work, and I know that this has been discussed already, and probably using the Chief Executive's words, horrifyingly, this did start in 2021. So it has been going on for a while, but the reason for this initial review was the expiration of the contracts. That was initially in 2022 for some of the contracts, the rest of them were in 2023, so we're already in a place of renewing these contracts. As part of that review, we did do a look at the entirety of the pools and leisure service, so looking at the role that Auckland Council would play and how we could deliver that. And out of that, there was 5 areas for change, the third of which was the review and improve of the contract delivery model. So the current challenges to the network that we currently see, which was part of the case for change for having a look at this, was that in the current contract arrangement, we are limited in our ability to performance manage the providers, and this also impacts on the local board engagement and what they currently receive. The contracts have been expired for a while now, and we're currently in the position of short-term renewals, which result in increased cost if we were to extend. The fragmented network currently has multiple providers reporting to certain single local boards. It limits provider efficiency and the ability to be able to invest in the service. The current structure is also based on legacy arrangements, which limits our ability to be able to optimise resourcing and our processes. Currently, the sites do not have consistent branding on the facilities, which means that customers are not always aware that they are using a council facility. Also, suppliers are not currently paying the living wage as a requirement. As part of the long-term plan, 2024, it was identified that we should be seeking opportunities where council did not have to be the default provider of some of our community services. Also, as part of the long-term plan, it was identified that there was a savings target for more effective service delivery. This is what we've already heard about today. As part of the 2022 work, it was also identified that council had a higher cost to serve than our providers. This is a slide that has been shown a few times now, but it's just articulating again the long-term plan that's just been signed off and the savings targets that we've got. These savings would be found through the implementation of more cost-effective service delivery regional services, and pools and leisure was identified as an opportunity within that. It's also worthwhile noting that for every 25 million in savings, there is a reduction of 1% from the average residential rates increase. So this is to go over in more detail some of the options that we came up to in the final shortlist. This has also been covered off in detail within the report. So the 3 options that we assessed included an option of a fully outsourced, which is found to have some of the best outcomes for increasing the innovation and the agility of council due to the ability to be able to increase investment within the service. This was also the greatest opportunity that was identified to be able to reduce costs as well as maximise our financial benefits. There was identified the ability to be able to continue on with the current delivery of the service, whilst also maintaining council's strategic leadership and operational oversight of the service. The second option was a partially outsourced model to retain a third of the network in council management. This was calculated by visitation numbers, not by site. And in this model, council will retain operational capability to be able to deliver the services. The third option was to retain the status quo contractual arrangements, 22 sites to remain within council and 20 sites to remain outsourced. This would further reduce the transition disruption and also the impact on staff. But it would also significantly impact the potential benefits, including the ability to be able to innovate and also to be able to find savings. I'm not going to go into too much more detail now, and happy to take any questions.
Councillor Sayers, please.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Thank you for that presentation. Can I just clarify on that third option? Obviously, the status quo isn't acceptable as it is right now, but if we went for that status quo option number 3, did you just say that could potentially incorporate looking at new ways of doing things, i.e. what we've just heard from the PSA, setting up these working parties and trying to drive some efficiencies and productivity gains? Is that potentially, or is that another option again? So I guess what I'm saying, status quo doesn't seem to be we can't do nothing, we need to do something, but is it partial outsourcing, is it fully outsourcing, or is there another option in there again about going to our workforce and tapping into their talents and asking them how they could improve things? Is that part of option 3 or not? Yeah.
Just before you answer that, Chantal, to be honest, there is no pure status quo situation here. In the event that there was a preference for option 2B, as was on the slide, we cannot proceed. We need to take account of the fact that we've had intelligence provided to us that there are cost-saving opportunities. Okay, so we need to do 2 things. We need to optimise the contracts that are out there, and we need to work on that part of the business within council to realise some of those opportunities. So there is, if we retain 22 leisure sites, we need to enhance the current operation, absolutely.
Okay, Phil, then if I may have that supplementary, I guess, we're going to confidentials, so I'm probably going into more detail on this, but just for the public, if there was instruction from us given to you as a CEO, I probably know the answer to this, right? And you were to ask to go away and look at these opportunities with our council-owned ones, is that something you feel your management team would be up to facilitating and making happen? And part of that, Phil, is I'm thinking, is that something that we can just do on our own with the PSA, or is that a facilitated process, or is the relationship strong enough with the PSA to go through that exercise without independent assistance?
Oh, we could have a look at getting some assistance with it, but we're certainly up for it. I gave that commitment earlier when I spoke, and yes, very comfortable that it's in partnership with the union and the staff who work in these areas.
All right, okay, thank you. That answers my question. So sorry, it was a roundabout way of asking it. Yeah, thanks.
I've got 3 more questions, but I might bravely ask one myself. I'll ask a few more when we go into confidential, because I'm a numbers person, but my impression is that the overheads are horrific. Either way. Has that been looked at as well? Because we're talking about the workers, but I mean, the overheads are seem to be horrific, whether it's public or private. Yeah, and I'm not into the public-private stuff. That's not an issue for me. I just want the best way to do it. But
Yes, the overheads need to be looked at. You know, and I might say that this is actually one of the key reasons at a group level that the group shared services effort is in place. It's fundamentally about back office corporate services, i.e. overheads, and we would look at other aspects of it in this process.
okay, that's good. So that you're going to look at the bits around the pool, but also the overheads as well. So I'm not into the public-private thing. No one's driving a government-made car. So, Council Fully, please.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair, and thank you, team. I've got some questions that will be in the confidential part, and I was just trying to figure out which ones I can ask you here. So I've got a couple of questions. The first one is around the current contracts for the third-party suppliers and their engagement with local boards. I know that, like in my ward, all of our pools are council-run, and we had very regular report backs from our council facilities, because they came along with all the other council facility team, and they would report quarterly, if not more often, to us as a local board. Is that currently required under the contracts for third-party suppliers? Are they currently required to report back to their local boards with the same regularity? And if it is, do you know that they do that to local boards, and have you had any feedback from those local boards about that engagement? And then I've got one other question. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor. When we went out and did all the local board workshops, one thing that came through to us a lot was the local boards wanted more engagement with the providers of their pools. So as part of the new contracts that we did negotiate with them, there is very clear expectations about having increased engagement with their providers, including quarterly performance reporting that will be going to the local boards.
Thank you. Now, I just wanted to ask a question on, I think it's slide number 3, where you've got on the long-term plan direction, Council's role is primarily as a facilitator and funder, and not as the default provider of services. But I was sitting here thinking, we do provide a lot of services, pools and leisure centres, yes, but we've also got the whole consenting regime, libraries, community centres, our parks and reserves, our park rangers, etc., etc. If we are looking at cutting costs here and becoming a facilitator and funder here, are we then also looking to move away from being a provider of those other services? And is this the future that we're looking at for council? Is us moving away from as a provider of all of those other community services that our communities rely on? Kia ora.
Yeah, thank you again for that question. And I don't think I would be able to comment on the rest of those services at this stage, because with each of those services, what we do is go through a service prioritisation model, and we assess them based upon their own merits and also what the role is for Auckland Council in delivering that. So that's part of the annual budget, I think 2022, was where we identified where our role would be in providing those services.
Okay, so then it's safe to say that that statement's not an absolute. You're not saying that we are wanting to move away completely from providing services.
No, that statement referenced some high-level guidance from the council of the day.
Yeah.
The decision as to what services we are in is absolutely for you to make, your prerogative.
Kia ora. Thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Walker, please.
Sure. So I'm on the same page as the Mayor around overheads. That's a problem across the entire organisation. But in this instance, if a turnaround involves revenue, what sort of market share have we got across Auckland in this sector? Do we have any idea? What's the size of the market, and what's our share of that?
I wouldn't be able to give you the exact percentage, Councillor, but we are definitely the majority provider of pools and leisure services. There is very rare that you do find a private provider that owns and operates a pool facility.
And is it a growing sector? Do we have some numbers around that? Are there more people participating in pools and leisure over time? Do we have any figures around that? And obviously we've got a growing population, we know that, and particularly high density in given areas.
We do have visitation numbers, yes, and we can provide that, and in general terms they've increased as I've spoken to previously.
Okay, so do we have we got a marketing plan going forward that's updated, that's addressing all the sort of issues that I'd expect to see in a marketing plan? And does that involve also financials like break-even analysis for the centres so that we know how we're going?
Through the chair, depending on what the outcome of today's discussion is, certainly marketing and looking at reporting and the collection of information in respect to the performance of these sites would certainly be something we would be looking at going forwards, but of course it is dependent on what the outcome of these discussions are.
I just signalled that I'd like to have a look at the marketing plan when it's available, and if there's any break-even analysis, that'd be handy too. And I did ask some questions around the financials. The other question I've got is I'm assuming we collect some information around customer satisfaction of our leisure centres. What's our customer satisfaction like? I'm guessing it's pretty good, but that's just a guess. The reason I'm asking this question, Mr. Chief Executive, is if we've already got good customer satisfaction and there's an opportunity to enhance it, especially if there are more services we can add, then we're well placed to lift our game and improve our revenue. And improving your revenue is often much easier than generating cost savings.
Look, I think my only comment is we need to attack both aspects, the costs and the revenue.
The reason I'm asking this is we only appear to be dealing with one side of the equation. I haven't had any information much on how we can make a success of this operation. So back to my question.
To be fair, Councillor, that wasn't the primary purpose of the report back on the Section 17A review, but you know, take it as read that we need to focus on both aspects going forward.
Just back to my question around customer satisfaction then.
So, kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to add some advice here. So, perhaps just a few questions. You've asked about market share. So, overall visitations for pools and leisure sites in Auckland are about $8.1 million a year. Auckland Council has a 60% share of that. Our growth has been very strong in the last year. We've grown 20% year on year in terms of volumes. So, that's been a good result. In terms of the Net Promoter Score and other measures, Council does do quite well, but a lot of that is also dependent on the size and the visitation to some of our sites. So it can be quite site dependent. Some sites can struggle, and some sites perhaps have a little bit more of a positive outcome. It's important to note that Net Promoter Score is not just a measure of our service at Auckland Council or actually the service of anyone else. It can also be influenced by the facility condition and other factors, because it simply asks one question, which is, would you recommend this service to a friend or colleague? So it's just important to put that into context, but I hope that helps. And yes, we do have marketing activities. They're conducted very regularly by our marketing teams and colleagues. We work with them on often quarterly membership campaigns to drive up membership activities. And as we see the outcomes of this program evolve, we will, of course, adapt to how we might need to change that.
And the last question I've got is, in attachment 4, there's a PowerPoint that shows the opportunities to improve the delivery of the service. Would it be the case that we could do all of this now? We don't need to outsource to have better, more consistent service levels, community-led provision and partnerships, efficient and effective network, and so on. We can do all of that, can't we, without outsourcing?
Thank you for the question, and sorry, I'm referring to the workshop slide that I think you've got in front of you there. And so there are some things to note about this. I thought that was my time on that.
I'm happy to give you some extra time.
Chicken or beef? Sorry, Chantal.
Oh, all good. So some of it talks about shifting to partnerships. Obviously, that wouldn't be so applicable for this one. Some of it is about reducing the cost for Aucklanders. One thing that I can say is that through this review, and I think you can see through that journey as well, the sort of one of those options provides a lot more cost effectiveness, which is a lot more easier to apply efficiencies than some of the others. That's not saying that efficiencies cannot be provided through some of those other models. It's just not as easy to be able to identify them. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillors Henderson, Ferry, Turner, Fletcher, Newman.
Gosh, okay, I'll be as quick as I can. They're kind of more fundamental ones, but it's just to sort of get it out into kind of the record, I think. So can you talk us through what happens if a contracted provider doesn't meet standards, for example, has concerning levels of customer feedback?
I'm just bringing up Peter Melville, who was in the negotiations team.
Oh. Yeah, kia ora. Direct answer to that question, we've put in place in the new contracts key performance indicators, which essentially set out the standards that we expect those providers to meet across a number of criteria, including customer satisfaction. And we have penalty provisions within those agreements if they consistently do not meet those standards. Those are essentially, well, yeah, I can talk about those probably more in the confidential section, but there are penalty provisions within them.
Come back to that bit in the confidential. Just one more then, and it's another sort of more fundamental one. Were savings identified specifically within the 17A review within our council-run facilities as part of that, or was it just not the focus of it? Were we focusing on the contracting side?
We did have a look at our current service provision, and that included efficiencies had been noted as part of, say, the long-term plan budget process, and also the continuous improvement process that the business always goes through. So we did compare our work against what had been identified for the budget.
Cool, thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Well done. Councillor Ferry, please.
Thank you. I think a lot of the questions I had coming into this item have been answered in both the staff conversation and now this one. My outstanding question is probably for Phil, actually, or maybe for our governance advisors around the move into confidential on this. I just want to understand why do we need to take the substantive decision in confidential? So I understand the commercial sensitivity of some of the numbers, but it seems to me that we're having a lot of the discussion here in open. So, yeah, this is not a loaded question at all. I am just wanting to understand, there's some decisions, some aspects of this, obviously what we have before us is some noting, but there's some aspects that we could take in open, given there's a very high level of public interest, and some aspects we could put into confidential, or how do we get through this? And I have a follow-up question about the confidentiality as well, but if you go with that first, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I think so the reason for confidentiality relates to the fact that we're in ongoing negotiations with the third-party providers. Those negotiations are of a commercial nature, obviously, and so information about the financials of the contracts, information about potential financial savings and benefits are relevant to those negotiations, as are the names of the providers that we're looking at. So I think the decision itself, I think the reasons for confidentiality will not apply once the decision has been made. The actual decision itself will be able to be released. The discussion around that decision and the information that we need to advise you on is confidential, and it's pretty hard to separate some of that advice from the confidential elements of it relating to those negotiations.
So as a follow-up to that, so I guess, and I see the sense of that, in all of the options, we have negotiations ongoing, is that correct?
That is correct. For any decision made by the governing body today, given any of the options that we've presented, we'll need to negotiate new contracts with the providers because the existing contracts have expired and they're on rollover. Rolling over. So we need to negotiate new contracts, and we're in that process at the moment.
Okay, so thank you. That gives me a bit of confidence, perhaps, in why we're going into confidential. Little pun there for the word nerds. The next question then is, you've just said, like, when we make the decision that it will be able to come out immediately. I'm a little bit concerned about how we are going to let staff know about that decision, given that we haven't done the best job in that so far. So what's the plan there? Because, yeah, it must be awful to find out this stuff through the media. How are we going to handle that, please?
Through the Chair, thank you for that question. And we did meet earlier this week with the PSA to work through our approach to both engagement and the consultation, if needed, with staff beyond today's decision. And we do have a staff engagement plan to communicate the decision or what's transpired today, and then depending on that, what the next steps look like. So that's very much a plan that's in place and ready to go once we have that decision.
So just for some reassurance on that then, I guess because, we're all getting a lot of messages from the public as well. So although we may be able to release the decision immediately after confidential, there may be a wait while staff are. Is that part of the plan? I just want to be really clear for everybody's expectations here that do we need to hold back? What's going to happen there?
Like I said, we do have a plan to convey the decision to staff, and we will do that as quickly as we can. Just one comment I would make about the nature of the workforce is that, the staff work in very different working arrangements and roster patterns, so getting out to everyone immediately is a challenge generally, but we do have a plan to make sure that we're getting communication out to them as quickly as we can through the various channels that they use. Okay. And we will, depending on the time of that decision, we may need to look at that more formally in the morning, but we will use the channels that are available to us as quickly as we can.
Okay, I'll leave that up to you guys to deal with appropriately. I just wanted to make sure that we'd thought about that and hopefully do the right thing. Thank you.
It pains me, but I have to move for an extension of time. Seconded by somebody rather there. Councillor Filipina. All those in favour say aye. Aye. To the contrary, aye. No.
Okay, next question.
Unfortunately, that was carried. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. Max, you might have to unscramble my thinking. Are we in a subsidised model here? Obviously, the overheads are high. We've got a subsidised model. Auckland Transport said to us at one stage that they were locked in a subsidised model where every extra ticket they sell actually makes their deficit go up, not down. Is this what we're trying to get away from? We can't see our way into profit in the system we've got right now?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll do my best to answer that question. I don't think we're in a subsidised model in the sense that every person who shows up to this, to a pool costs us money. I don't think that's the situation. I think we have some revenue associated with when people for the services where people are paying for the service. There is some revenue that comes in. However, these are all subsidised services, so they cost money to provide, and so while there is some revenue we can generate, they're going to continue to be subsidised services, and particularly the pools and recreation centres.
Thank you. Last question. Are the contracts we have got with the ones that are already privately managed guaranteed in some way to, you know, the turnover, the returns? You know, is there some guarantees there, or is it just a straightforward lease of the facility to the organisation?
Yeah. So there is one centre which is a lease, which is the Olympic pool. In the Waitemata local board area. The others are all contracts where the contract is for managing the facility, not for leasing the facility, which is a difference, but it's you know, can be a significant difference in terms of how the money works. So my understanding is that none of the existing contracts have any profit share involved in them, so that the revenue is collected by the provider.
Sorry,
that's right.
You were going to say something? So okay, that's kind of turned my question around. So what we're saying here then is that to privatise them all is really just to give us the facility to manipulate contracts to deliver different outcomes in order to get the dollars moved around, yes?
I'm not quite sure that's what we're saying. What the analysis that has been done shows is that if we, and we've been tested this with the market, so we've asked providers to say how much they would it would cost us to contract to them to manage these facilities. And the information that's come back to us is that those contracts cost less than what we are currently planning to pay to manage those facilities. So there are financial savings to us compared with the status quo. I think as Chantal mentioned earlier, those contractors have done the work to figure out how much they think they can run these facilities for. They've bid for that, and they've included within that their own margin that they'll need to make. But it's cheaper than what we can provide. As we've had some discussion today, it's possible that we can look at how we can find savings within the current council managed facilities. So how we can run our own facilities more efficiently, and that could lead to some savings. But those are harder for us to find than through the contracting out model. It doesn't mean we can't find them.
Thank you.
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. This is the first time that Rachel Kelleher has I've been here anyway, appeared as director, and I'm sorry, Rachel, it's on a quite a challenging topic today, but it's good to see you in this role. My question is, and I need to give you context why I'm taking such an interest in this. Under the earlier council, the value for money work was started under the CEO Performance Committee, and there was some realisation that the financial situation of the council was not sustainable. There was a decision taken by Phil Goff to take that work out of the CEO Performance and have it as a standalone committee. And so I followed it as chair of that committee for a while, very closely, and then I lost perhaps a bit of visibility over it. So the question I really need you to answer, because I think has been misunderstood, is under 17A, is it a bit like depreciation? We are required to give consideration to looking at the most effective delivery of council.
In a simple answer, yes. The legislation states that we have an obligation to review the cost effectiveness of our services.
Okay, so it was something that was embarked upon because we were required to do it. There was no opting out. It was just something as part of the overall analysis of council. So there wasn't a sinister agenda in behind this.
That is correct. There's 3 legislative triggers, which does cause a Section 17A. The first of which is the expiration of a contract. The second of which is every 6 years, a service must be reviewed. And the third one is upon direction. So that could either be political or management.
Okay, so I have a question that I suppose is best posed to the CEO, and that I'm hearing from both the PSA and the council that we've got to run this more effectively, and let's acknowledge that we've actually got a mixed model. And I hear, listening closely around the table, that there is some common ground that we can find on this. What I want to know, if we're going to continue with a mixed model, and I do not want to get caught up on commercial sensitivity, so I'm not naming any names. I want the assurance in whatever methodology is put together and framework that we might deal with within the confidential section or subsequent committees. I want confirmation that there will be some recording of historical performance. Can you give me the comfort of knowing that if we are to progress this, and I'm hoping we can find, I'm looking for the Mayor for some leadership on this to navigate this, but I would like to be absolutely assured that there will be historical performance taken into account.
I can give you that assurance. I think that is a relevant matter for consideration when any contracts reach, through the procurement process, reach the Revenue and Expenditure Committee, who actually have the mandate to endorse the letting of a contract. The Chair may want to comment, but the relevant criteria are going to be cost, quality, experience, in that deliberation.
Chantal, you've done a very good job in presenting this at the workshop and then presenting it again today. Is there any information that has not been put on the table that we should be aware of?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We have tried to be as transparent as possible, including also attaching the business case executive summary. You would have seen with all the workshop slides there was a huge amount of detail in there. And also trying to be open to answering any questions that the councillors may have, including that drop-in session. I would like to think that we've provided you with all the information that we have on hand as well. But if there is anything missing, happy to try and find that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, last two. Watson and Bartley, please.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I guess, yeah, okay. A question on this, really the section 17A review, really goes to the value of the value for money review. I mean, I've been listening to what's been saying about track records and this almost artificial division between a choice of option and then a choice of provider, because in reality we've already had a recommendation and we've already had providers' names. I understand I don't mention anything here, but what really I can't understand in all this weighing up, because that section 17A by definition says that it's not just, it requires cost effectiveness, but which goes to current service arrangements, needs of community, service provision, etc. So it's not just Oscar Wilde, the man who knows the cost of everything but the value of nothing, which is what we're sort of seeing here in my view. But when I look at the customer satisfaction, we've had data on this since 2017. That's what, 7-8 years. And we had data in the last 5 years that goes to all those things I just quoted there, because it's essentially encapsulating the user's response
they're the most important people, aren't they? The people that are going to the facilities. They give you the best idea of what's going there. The question that Claudia referred to, I think, was actually quite a good one. Would you recommend this facility to someone else? Makes a lot more sense for a clear-cut answer than a lot of the ones we go out to consultation with. And the results of that are really stark. I mean, there's no debating who's performing well in terms of the customers and who is not. No, both ways. Yet that doesn't quite mesh up with the recommendations that have come through to us in terms of preferred option, preferred providers, etc. So my question at the end of all of that is, how much did that customer satisfaction data translate through to the Section 17A requirements going to, needs of communities, service delivery, etc., everything that is implicit in the responses of the customers there? I mean, that was almost discovered by accident by Councillor Henderson at the workshop. And good on him. So how did that performances on the ground, given that we've got 7 years of data, flow through to the various recommendations that have come through, both in terms of options and providers?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. So you're referring to, I think, paragraph 16 in the report, where it does talk about current service arrangements meeting the needs of the communities. And within that, there's a couple of different aspects that we do use within the Section 17A review to be able to determine Council's provision of services for our communities. The first of which is a service prioritisation matrix that I spoke about before, which does talk about Council's role in providing those things. But more detailed to the service itself, there are multiple different components in which we understand what the communities need of that service is. That's sometimes identified through the levels of service, also through the councils and local boards' direction on what they want that service to be able to provide for communities. That includes, say, community access requirements, what pricing they would like to have at those facilities, what opening hours they would like to see, even, if new facilities or new services are required within those spaces. So there's many different components of that. NPS scores, we have been open about those scores. That was a consideration as we went through this process as well, but it was not the only consideration.
Okay, yeah. And are those scores, are they made public? Like, are they publicised? I think of other leisure centres overseas, like Glasgow City Council. All their public feedback and surveys are put on the public record. Are these put on the public record?
Yes, I believe they're in the quarterly performance reports.
In our quarterly performance reports. Okay, thank you.
Can I, just want to add to that. So, with respect to the net promoter scores, they are important, and customer satisfaction is important, and has been a kind of front of mind for some of this process. In interpreting that information, we just need to be cautious that we're not necessarily comparing apples with apples. At least some of what goes to the question of would you recommend a facility to other Aucklanders is about the state of the asset and how good the asset is, which is something which is council's responsibility. And in any of these scenarios, we own these assets and we are responsible for the overall state of the infrastructure and renewal of it. So that's an important factor in whether somebody will recommend a service, is actually whether or not they think it's a good asset in the first place, and it doesn't necessarily pertain to who's managing it. However, there is no doubt that the trend that you mentioned exists, in the sense that the council-run facilities have higher net promoter scores than the contracted out facilities, and that is an important factor which needs to be considered, particularly in any decision to contract out. We have to look at the track record of those providers in leading new contracts, and as we talked about earlier, the new proposed contracts, the work that's gone on to making sure that those contracts have really clear KPIs in terms of customer service, as well as mechanisms to actually enforce that. And that's going to be an important factor regardless of which model we choose. For the new contracts, we need to make sure those are more robust and we're getting a high level of service.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Bartley.
Oh, thank
None
you.
of you people sneaking off getting afternoon tea yet. You've got to earn it. Right to the end, please.
Okay. I just wanted to ask, because the contract management seems to be the tool that we will have for that political accountability. If we go ahead with expanding the outsourcing, do we have any examples of effective contract management and enforcement, and where we've actually, penalised our contractors for not providing the service that Aucklanders expect of us?
Thank you for the question, and perhaps not for getting into detail right here and now, I guess in the same interest of not having those contractors necessarily in the room to speak themselves. We do have examples of contracts where we have held the performance of that contract, the contractor to account for the performance of that contract, including through some of the work we've done through our full facilities delivery. Okay. So certainly that, those provisions are in the contract. I think Max mentioned the intent to tighten up aspects of these contracts, including reporting, and we also talked about the clauses around, if there is failure to perform and what that would look like. So that's certainly something that we're mindful of in the renewal of these contracts.
And I just also wanted to ask, it's clear that there are issues with the current outsourcing, and it's even in your report, all the challenges to the network, not meeting local board expectations, the limited contractual ability to effectively manage providers, what we're hearing from customers, what we see on the ground ourselves, people unable to swim in the pools because the lanes have been rented out to paying organisations. Why is the recommendation to expand something that we already have so many issues with? It's like, yeah, it's bad, but let's expand on it and do more of it.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, the first point to make is that we have acknowledged, and part of what this review has found is that we need to improve the contracts because they aren't fit for purpose. And so regardless of what decision you make today, we need to go ahead and do that. And I know that's relevant to the facilities in your ward. And we would hope that with new contracts we would see an improvement of service. The question of why is the recommendation as it is anyway? I think the recommendation is set out has been made for the reasons set out in the report, which is around cost efficiencies, more or less, and the fact that the review found that we could get cost savings while maintaining the same level of service in the sense that we're saying, opening hours, prices, those things. We're not saying that's the only thing that you need to consider in this decision, but that's the reason why the recommendation has been made, for those reasons.
Cost savings. Money. Got it.
Well, it's the combination of the level of service and how expensive that service is, and the direction that was given to us in the long-term plan was that we needed to make some pretty significant cost savings, and one of the ways we needed to do that was to find more cost-effective ways of delivering regionally networked services such in pools and leisure. So we're responding to that direction by coming to you with a way of doing that.
Oh, Councillor Richard Hills.
No, it was just
last desperate question.
It was, and I guess it's trying to be transparent because I've got lots of questions, but I guess in my heart of hearts, and I want to acknowledge your office and others have been trying to work on a status quo related thing, and we know there's likelihood that might happen. So I guess for, public knowledge, we're going to go into confidential, and that's probably going to be the debate. So some of this is a bit of theatre, but I also just wanted to make sure that Chantal knows that whatever happens isn't a reflection on your work, because I know you're just having to do what we request of you. And normally we do support these value for money things, but there's been a lot of passion behind this specific one. So I guess just want to make sure Chantal and the team know that what happens in confidential is not a reflection on her and the team, but it might be leaning towards status quo, but we obviously can't say that until the debate. But.
Okay, that's all the questions I've got. Alf wants to make a comment, then I'm going to let you, we're going to force you to pass the summary movement, and then you can have afternoon tea, but not until then.
Can you move and second that, please?
I'll move her and second her that we said that. I'm quite happy to move that. Does anyone wants to second that?
Baker.
Baker, well done. Okay, we'll set that for a bit there. Alf, you've got. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please retire. Alf, please comment.
Yeah, look, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, the comment is because I want to have a cake. So that's why I put my hand up so I can comment. But I just wanted to say to you, Claudia, I just want to say thank you so much for you, the team, that had to do it. And if you have a look at the presentation, the second page of that presentation explains why. It was a 17A, and for those that were around that table at the time, and we knew it had to be kicked off with the contract, so it had to be done. So I congratulate the team for putting in front of us. Phil, I congratulate you because of the comments you made in the open workshop agenda when you said that this is so important to the community and to Tāmaki Makaurau that you decided to bring it to a workshop. Because as a result, I believe that we have a way forward when we get to confidential item. So that's why I'm saying to you and Councillor Hills and many others around this table have been working with staff around this and same with Tamsin, thank you as well. But look, I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that the work had to be done. It's now at decision time. I'm so glad that it came to us around this and we have an agenda item. Also want to acknowledge the PSA in regards to the work that they have done and the staff. I'm not going to read, I've got an email here from a very senior manager in one of our pool and leisure centres. But what he sent me is something I believe will be covered off in the confidential agenda. So look, I just want to mihi to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for that. All those in favour, please. Oh, bloody hell. Fully, it better be a damn good question, comment, and say...
Comment, not question, comment. Kia ora, Your Worship. Look, I've got more to say in the confidential part, but in this open forum, I did want to just acknowledge all of the people who have been sending through their emails. Many of them I know personally, and usually when you get all of those bulk emails coming through, I don't recognise any of the names. But this time was a bit different. I recognised almost all of the names that came through, including members of my own family who emailed me about this issue. And I also want to particularly acknowledge and mihi the Otara Youth Hub, who, as of about an hour ago, had 962 submissions from an online survey that they only opened 24 hours ago. I'm really mindful that we generally, as a council, don't engage well with young people, don't engage well with Māori, Pasifika, or people from my ward. So I just wanted to acknowledge them in that open forum.
Okay, but that's pretty close to electioneering rather than
well,
commenting.
I'm just acknowledging them because we can't...
Wave to your friends and then we'll go to Councillor Sayers. You're not waving to anyone at walk with, I hope.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I want to make a comment, just more of a summation, just going into this agenda item with an open mind, that, you know, going towards privatisation, partial or full, doesn't mean the loss of facilities, doesn't mean losing any more recreation, any more sports training, any more pools. And, you know, we've all got a lot of messages about putting profit before people and making sure the community was looked after. Reading the papers, that didn't seem like there was going to be a problem with privatisation. But I have listened with an open mind, and there's just two comments I'd like to make. One, obviously contract renewals, when we go through that with the existing providers, for the local boards to definitely be strengthened in their ability to be able to question and get answers back from those providers to their satisfaction. That would be a comment there. The comment would be about if we move down a track where we want to involve and consult with the PSA, that the target, the overall savings for the network is clearly articulated to them. Maybe we resolve on this, because those savings are likely to be different from each facility, won't be the same, across each one. So just so there's very clear, if there's going to be a savings target, let's just, make that clear and obvious. I'm a bit reluctant to go into confidential worship. Reading those, the PowerPoint presentation, all I can see are the cost-saving targets there. I can't see names, I can't see contract details. I would rather that was done in the open, but listening to Max of why we're going in there, I'll accept that. So, yeah, onward and upward. Thank you.
Fairly good. That is definitely a comment. Councillor Lee, a comment, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, I want to acknowledge the delegation from the Public Service Association who are so committed to looking after the interests of their members, in this case, our staff, the council staff. But I also want to thank the members of the public and the council staff who took the time to write to me in the very short period where this has become a public issue for all of us, all with a different story and all very compelling and all revealing, particularly in terms of the council staff, a real passion and commitment to serve the council and to serve the public, in this case in the field of leisure and pools. And I can't help but recalling a very recent message we got from senior management that after the long process of the LTP, which started almost immediately after the annual plan last year, was it 60 workshops, confidential workshops of course, 130 hours, whatever, that the staff, the management were looking for some stability and for the politicians, the councillors, not to unnecessarily rock the boat. Well, what on earth is going on here? Where is the consistency in this? Now, we are told that this process has been going on since 2021, but somehow could not be dealt with in the how many meetings and the year-long process in the long-term plan. Well, the feedback and the surveys and the information that I've been made aware of in recent days would indicate that we are providing very popular and efficient leisure and leisure activity and pool services. So it would seem that we're way more efficient at providing pool and leisure services than we are at reviewing those services since 2021 and not in time to be dealt with in the long-term plan. Very, very interesting. What's happened here is that a coalition of interests has come into play opposing this. Members of the public, particularly those mindful of health and well-being, are very, very angry at the idea of privatising these services, and as are, of course, the staff. And there is I have to say, coming through from messages from staff, and I never ever get messages like this. There's the feeling of hurt coming from those workers, and I can understand that. Now, we are told that under Section 17A that we have to do this review, have to. And when Councillor Fletcher asked the managers, so there's no option? And the managers all nodded, no option, including a lawyer, no option. Well, that's not true, because under 17A3B, there is an out clause that it is not necessary to do these reviews if it's considered the cost of doing them is not worth the trouble. Now, it says costs, not costs, costs. So in those costs, I think would be staff loyalty, staff confidence, staff dedication, and that's a cost that doesn't seem to have been taken into account by management at all. And so they say there's no option. Well, that's legally incorrect information being given to this council. There was an option not to review. On the other hand, talking about no options, Section 77 of the Local Government Act and 78 in those sections say that the council must provide information and consideration, due consideration when making a decision, not rushing them, and they must provide the advantages and disadvantages of the proposed decision. Now, I saw options in the staff work, which has been going on since 2021, but absolutely no advantages or disadvantages of the various options, including the status quo, which I think is the interests of the public and the interests of our frontline staff. And what a dedicated group of people they appear to be. And it would seem to me that this is one of the fields of activity that the council is way more efficient in providing a popular service than the private sector. And we hear that there are expectations that these services must provide efficiencies, must provide savings. When was the hell the last time that anyone approached Kinetic Bus Company and said, let's have reduced costs for your demands that go up year on year on year from this Aussie-based investment company and all the rest of them? Fulton Hogan, you know, I won't. Anyway, Downers, do they actually, are they ever asked to sharpen their pencil? No, they bump their prices up every year, and these people who are going to move in from Australia will do the same. Do you think for 1 minute that an aggressive Australian corporate, profit-driven, can provide a more efficient, cost-effective service in our own services, in our own facilities, in our own buildings than we can ourselves? If they can, we are in real trouble. But of course, it's not true. We can provide those services more effectively than an outside profit-driven foreign company can. And that's what our staff and what the public are telling us. My final point is this. This is way too important, given the factors involved here. This is unique. This is not just the public that are up in arms. It's our own frontline people, dedicated people. Therefore, in terms, we have a real job to do here, senior management, in restoring trust, if you don't mind me saying so. And having this decision carried out in secret is not likely to engender trust, which has already been badly eroded. It's not too late to restore things, but I think it's important that we make an honest decision out in the open and stop this review, stop this change, and keep the status quo. Thank you very much.
For that. Councillor Watson, one small one.
Yes, Arthur. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And I guess it is to really emphasise that last point. If the last week, if it's done anything for me, and I'm sure for a number of other people, is really emphasise not so much the value for money review, but the value of these facilities to our communities, to the people who work there, and also to every part of Auckland, no matter where you look. These sports and leisure centres, in some cases, are the sole face of the council now. The council buildings, civic centres have long gone. And what it has brought home, and those results in terms of quizzing the customers go, is how well performing the council institutions are and the personnel who work in them. So if anything, what this review has done is shown the value of those centres for our society going forward. And there was a university lecturer who was on the ball really quick, a person today who specialises, lectures in public space and the importance of sites of social infrastructure in our cities. And this person had found out late in the piece, like us and like the workers, of what was being proposed, and has given a really insightful deconstruction of how historically these leisure centres and these pools have developed to reflect the culture of New Zealand and particularly Auckland, particularly pools, in terms of not just a place to go and recreate, but to teach people how to swim, because our death rates in swimming-related or sea-related accidents are horrific. And historically, post-World War II, that's been the development of these pools. That's where it started off, and it's been refined and developed since then. So I guess, Mr. Mayor, we're going into secret, confidential. I really hope that the people who are online and the people who have been through the ringer, obviously the last little while, wondering what on earth's going to happen to them in this time of great economic uncertainty, this value for money process has, for many people around this table, has served to emphasise the value of their work, of the institutions that they work in, and the effect on our community as a whole. So I think it's important that's said, because it's very clear from what we've heard thus far that that's probably the last thing they're thinking at the moment. But I know that a lot of people around here think that, and think that with some conviction, and, and this process has done it.
I think we've had enough from everybody, honestly, now to go into the next lot.
Well, we'd only have enough if you chipped in, then that would be the end.
I mean, I don't necessarily need to go into secrecy, but I think that there are certain groups here that have got certain views, and certain, I don't think this is advanced by being anti-private versus public. I don't have a view on that. I just want to know what is a good thing for us. The profit motive isn't a horrible thing. Nobody drives a car made by a government, or the last ones did were in East Germany, and the Trabant wasn't a good one. It's whether or not we're going to be able to have a rational debate about what's the right thing to do for these. I'm quite happy to hear from the staff. I'm quite happy to hear the PSA tell us how they do better. They do their argument no good at all by being by covering this as privatisation. It's suggesting that the workers in the other pools are somehow or other horrid. They're all workers everywhere. I just want to do the right thing here and get away from this pro and anti. I mean, if we were so good, we'd have no complaints about building inspectors. We have no complaints about any of our staff anywhere. Our staff are just like every other staff. They're in the bell curve. We've got great ones. Most of them are pretty good. But the idea that this is somehow or other a fight for communism versus we live in a country where most people who pay wages and rates are actually in private enterprise. So don't be nasty about them. You know, I'm quite happy to hear from the PSA. I had a very good relationship with them the other day. The head of the PSA didn't give me a lecture of pro-communist, anti-public, private sector thing. We just talked rationally about how we could improve the pools, and they had some very good ideas. So I'm quite open to them. So do you really think that you're going to add to this, Councillors Bartley and Hills, who want to say some more? Please do. But
I just wanted to clarify B, because the way I read it, it kind of says that the answer is having better contracts with service delivery partners, and I don't believe that's right. So
I think we need better contracts with our own people and with the others as well.
Yeah, but
we just need better contracts.
Yeah, but then this is saying that that's what the review identified, right?
For those aspects that are currently outsourced.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I move the
better
motion.
Contracts with their insourced ones. I want better contracts about the amount of bloody overheads that they all seem to cost. I want it better. So I think if the review has identified better contracts with service delivery partners, including ourselves, if you ask me. Yeah, I'm quite happy to put that. Better contracts all up. Strengthen KPIs about customer satisfaction as well. And I don't mind if we're paying everyone the living wage, that's okay with me as well. I think the whole thing today is we're wandering into Phil's job, and I don't think that's a good idea.
Your Worship, I move that the motion be put.
Seconded by Williamson. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, okay. Yeah, well, you can do something. We're not, if you want a job as the Chief Executive, please apply for it. I'm going to move. The next one is a summary of governing body information, including briefings. Happy to move. Well done. Has anyone ever beaten you to that?
But he hasn't actually moved it.
Henderson, in favour?
We actually did
Aye.
resolve the last time.
All those in favour say. Beg your pardon?
Passed the closure motion. Well, we passed the motion to close it, but we still haven't actually
sorry,
voted
I've
through
got
the
ahead of
last
myself.
voting.
Are we going to vote on this one here? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary? Carried. Now, we have a mover and seconder for the summary of governing body. All those in favour? Aye. Contrary? Okay. All those. Any extraordinary business? No, thank God. Do we go into negative secrecy now?
Oh.
Mr. Mayor.
Can I please ask, what was that recommendation
Mayor.
about Palestine? Was it? Oh. We apparently voted it through. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, could I just request that an extraordinary item coming from the Waiheke Local Board refers to difficulties Palestinian New Zealanders are having getting their relatives out of the Gaza area, and I've had discussions with staff about it. It would just be sensible just to have a quick explanation so that I can go back to the local board on that, please.
I know nothing about this.
Right.
I know nothing about this. I think the CEO's got to answer that one.
Through the chair, we've sought advice from MFAT about the Waiheke Local Board resolution, and that will come through to you, councillor, and other councillors as soon as we've received that advice formally. We will also note the Waiheke Local Board resolution on the next month's governing body information process report, so that it is recorded there. And if we receive further local board resolutions of a similar nature, they will also be recorded. So we'll come back to you as soon as possible with that advice.
Thank you very much.
We're going to have a break now for a little bit, and after that we'll return and we'll question whether we're going to go into secrecy or not. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.